I knew the moment she told me to clear my desk that something much bigger than losing a job had just begun. I had given this company 16 years of my life, building it from nothing into a respected name in the industry. Yet she dismissed me in front of everyone, her voice full of certainty and ambition, believing she was shaping a brighter future. I stood silent as people stared, expecting me to protest or defend my worth, but I offered nothing in return. My silence carried more weight than any words could have offered in that moment of humiliation. I walked out with the same worn briefcase I had carried into hundreds of boardrooms over the years. She thought she had ended my story with that single announcement, not realizing she had triggered something far beyond her control. The contract she signed without reading carefully contained clauses she never imagined would matter. The clients I had served faithfully for years would soon decide whether to follow her promises or my proven record of loyalty and results. Driving home with the box of my belongings beside me, I thought about the sacrifices made for this company. I remembered the birthdays missed, the late nights chasing deals, the moments of exhaustion that built everything she now controlled so casually. It became clear this was no longer about my job or even my pride. This was about showing that decisions have consequences when ambition tramples loyalty and respect without thought. When I left the building that afternoon, I carried more than just the box of photographs, pens, and forgotten coffee mugs from my office, because what I carried most heavily was the silence of everyone watching as I walked past their cubicles. They had seen me guide this company through economic downturns, client departures, and product failures. But none of that mattered when the new leadership decided experience was too expensive to keep. Amelia, the owner's daughter, had inherited the title of CEO a month earlier, fresh from a university program and filled with ideas about modernization and efficiency, convinced the company needed to cut costs and reinvent itself to survive. She looked at me as a relic from the past, someone who had stayed too long and cost too much, someone who represented everything she wanted to erase with her glossy reports and polished presentations. She told the board that new technology could replace personal relationships, that contracts mattered more than handshakes, that loyalty was sentimental rather than strategic, and they believed her because she spoke with the confidence of someone who had never seen plans collapse under real pressure. The room fell silent when she announced my termination because everyone knew my work had built the foundation under their feet. Yet no one said anything because ambition makes people quiet when power changes hands suddenly. I did not argue because anger would have made me small, and I understood that dignity would matter more than words once everything unfolded publicly. The contract I had signed years earlier protected me in ways Amelia had not considered because it was written during negotiations with her father, a man who valued loyalty above all else. He had insisted on clauses regarding client retention, public reputation, and contractual bonuses in case of termination without cause. And Amelia had signed every page without reading carefully because she believed nothing could touch her authority. As I drove home that day, I thought about those clauses and how they would soon turn her victory into something she never expected, because the moment clients began leaving, the board would start asking questions about whether ambition without experience could keep the company alive. I had built those relationships personally, calling clients at midnight when equipment failed, flying across states to negotiate contracts face-to-face, attending weddings and funerals because business was built on trust rather than spreadsheets, alone. Amelia believed software could replace those connections, but software could not answer a call when someone's shipment was delayed, and software could not calm a client ready to cancel a $1 million order because they felt abandoned by inexperienced staff reading from scripts. I knew many clients would follow me rather than stay with a company that discarded the person who had solved their problems for years. Some had already hinted at moving contracts if I ever left because they trusted me, not the name on the building's door. Amelia thought firing me would save money, impress shareholders, and prove her authority. But she had underestimated how fragile authority becomes when reality turns against the story you are trying to tell. That evening, I read the contract carefully with my attorney and understood that public termination triggered compensation tied to client retention levels, reputation damage, and premature termination without documented cause. Amelia believed she had ended a career with one announcement. But in truth, she had activated a chain of events that would place her own leadership under the same scrutiny she had aimed at me. I did not call anyone that night because silence felt heavier than any explanation. And sometimes silence speaks loudest when everyone waits for your reaction and you give them nothing at all. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual because sleep never comes easily after watching years of work erased with one careless gesture. I made coffee slowly, letting the silence of my apartment stretch around me while the city outside carried on as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything felt different, heavier somehow, like I had stepped out of one life and into another. Overnight, I kept thinking about the early years when the company barely survived, when I spent weekends driving across the state chasing small accounts because we needed every sale to keep the lights on, and how Amelia had been in high school back then while her father and I fought to hold everything together. She had never seen late-night phone calls from clients ready to cancel contracts unless someone fixed problems immediately, or last-minute flights during storms because a shipment had gone missing, or the way trust built slowly after years of keeping promises even when circumstances turned against us completely. I remembered sleeping on my office couch during a product recall while we worked 70 hours straight to save the company's reputation, because losing that contract would have ended everything, and how her father told me afterward that I had carried the business on my back that month. I thought about the birthdays missed, the vacations canceled, the arguments at home when my wife asked why the company always came first, and how I kept saying it was temporary, that someday the sacrifices would be worth something, that loyalty always brought rewards in the end. Maybe that was true once, back when loyalty meant more than efficiency charts and cost reduction plans drawn by people who never sold anything outside of presentations filled with impressive words. Amelia believed she was building a future without understanding the cost of erasing the past that made her position possible. And the board believed her because confidence often hides inexperience until consequences arrive too late to reverse. I sat there drinking coffee while the contract pages lay open on my table because I wanted to read every line carefully before deciding anything. My attorney had written clauses about termination without documented cause, about bonuses tied to client retention levels, about damages owed if public actions harmed reputation or future opportunities, and Amelia had triggered every single one by firing me the way she did. I realized this was no longer about pride or revenge, but about forcing the company to face what loyalty was worth before they threw it away forever. By noon, I had decided to stay silent publicly while preparing everything privately, because silence unsettles people who expect outrage more than patience. And Amelia would not understand how much power silence carries until consequences arrived. Carrying my signature at the bottom of every page her lawyers wished she had read first. 3 days passed before anyone from the company called me because they expected anger, arguments, and demands for meetings. But instead, I gave them nothing except silence that made everyone uneasy. Amelia sent emails through her assistant saying the decision was final and hoping I understood the company needed a new direction. But I did not respond because she would learn soon enough that silence becomes its own kind of weapon when people expect noise. My former colleagues began sending messages saying clients were already asking questions about why I was gone so suddenly and why no explanation had been given to the people whose contracts represented most of the company's revenue. I knew those clients well because I had built every one of those relationships personally over years of late-night calls, problem-solving, and face-to-face negotiations when things turned difficult and required trust no software system could replace. Some of them had been considering larger contracts for next year, contracts Amelia believed would stay no matter who managed them because she thought relationships existed between companies rather than between people keeping promises. She had no idea many clients stayed because they trusted me specifically, because they believed I would answer the phone at midnight and find solutions when everything was falling apart around them. Amelia thought software dashboards and automated responses would make the company look modern and efficient. But clients wanted human voices, not automated messages offering apologies without answers. My silence allowed those clients to decide for themselves whether they still felt confident signing new contracts with a company that discarded the person who had solved every crisis for over a decade. Some began calling my personal phone asking whether I planned to work elsewhere and whether I would stay in the industry or retire completely because they wanted to follow me rather than trust Amelia's vision built on cost-cutting and empty presentations. I told them nothing about my plans because decisions carry more weight when made carefully instead of emotionally. And I wanted Amelia to believe everything remained under control while the foundation cracked beneath her without warning. My attorney advised patience while gathering documentation showing the termination violated multiple contractual clauses, including reputation harm, client retention metrics, and severance guarantees Amelia had never read carefully. Every day of silence increased pressure inside the company as executives began questioning whether firing me without cause had been a mistake, because clients were refusing meetings with Amelia's new team. By the end of that week, shareholders were asking why revenue projections looked uncertain after years of stability, and Amelia kept insisting everything was fine, even while everyone around her recognized cracks forming across the surface she tried. So hard to control. The following Monday, I met with my attorney again because we needed every document organized before sending the first official notice to the company outlining the violations Amelia had triggered without realizing it. My attorney explained that termination without documented cause activated compensation tied to client retention percentages, public reputation damage, and accelerated stock option vesting clauses. Amelia never noticed when signing the agreement her father and I negotiated years earlier. She believed firing me would remove an expensive employee without considering the cost of breaking a contract designed to protect someone whose relationships carried most of the company's revenue. While Amelia prepared press releases about modernization and efficiency, we prepared evidence showing how quickly clients began questioning their commitments after my departure became public knowledge. Several major accounts refused renewal meetings with her new sales director because they considered our personal trust agreements more important than contracts written by lawyers who never set foot on job sites or manufacturing floors. My attorney said we would give the company 30 days to resolve everything quietly before filing claims for breach of contract, defamation through public termination, and damages tied to client losses directly connected to my removal. We documented every message from former colleagues describing clients expressing concern, every voicemail from executives admitting Amelia underestimated my importance, every email from shareholders demanding explanations about falling revenue, projections after years of consistent growth. I remained silent publicly because outrage burns quickly, but patience unsettles people who expect emotional reactions rather than strategic responses delivered slowly and professionally. Amelia sent another email through her assistant, claiming she hoped we could part on good terms without unnecessary complications. Words written by someone realizing too late that consequences move slowly but arrive heavily once momentum builds beyond control. Meanwhile, clients continued contacting me privately asking whether I planned to start my own firm or join a competitor because they preferred following someone who had earned their trust through years of solving problems without excuses or delays. I told them nothing about future plans because uncertainty helped pressure grow inside the company, while Amelia insisted everything remained stable despite growing evidence suggesting otherwise. My attorney recommended waiting until the next shareholder meeting before taking further action because financial reports would reveal declining projections caused by nervous clients refusing to commit until leadership proved capable of delivering stability without the person who built those relationships over 16 years. Each day, Amelia spoke confidently about modernization, while executives whispered about lawsuits, falling contracts, and shareholders losing patience because silence on my part left them guessing about what might happen next. The board began requesting private meetings with Amelia, demanding explanations for revenue declines and public rumors about possible legal actions involving my termination. Meetings she described as routine, even though internal reports showed growing concern among investors who valued consistency above ambition. We gathered everything quietly, while Amelia spoke loudly about innovation, because noise impresses crowds temporarily, but contracts, evidence, and financial losses speak longer and louder once lawyers deliver them in writing. My attorney said timing matters more than emotion when confronting companies publicly, because consequences carry greater weight when facts replace feelings completely. And I agreed because Amelia believed ambition protected her until reality arrived, carrying numbers she could not dismiss with speeches about efficiency and modernization. By the second week after my termination, the silence finally began working the way my attorney predicted, because clients started canceling meetings with Amelia's new leadership team while asking whether I would consider managing their accounts, independently if I ever returned to the industry under a different banner. They told executives they felt uncomfortable committing new contracts until leadership stabilized, because relationships built over years could not be replaced by software systems and interns reading scripted responses to real problems requiring real solutions. Amelia believed technology would automate trust the way machinery automates production. But she did not understand trust grows slowly through personal sacrifices impossible to quantify on spreadsheets filled with optimistic projections for investors, demanding efficiency over loyalty. My attorney documented every client statement linking my termination to hesitation about future commitments, because evidence matters more than opinions once lawsuits reach courtrooms where contracts speak louder than corporate press releases, promising innovation without delivering stability. Amelia continued speaking publicly about modernization while privately emailing shareholders insisting everything remained under control, even though revenue forecasts showed sharp declines after several major clients requested delays before signing. Renewals they had verbally promised months earlier when I still managed their accounts personally. Her assistant contacted me twice, asking whether I would consider meeting privately to discuss possible resolutions before shareholders grew more concerned. But my attorney advised against responding until formal notice reached the board because silence created pressure. Written words could never achieve so effectively. Meanwhile, former colleagues described chaos spreading inside the company as department heads, questioned whether leadership understood the financial consequences arriving slowly but predictably since clients valued relationships more than digital. Dashboards Amelia displayed during presentations filled with colorful charts hiding uncomfortable truths behind temporary optimism. Each day, the gap between her public confidence and private panic widened because executives began warning the board about falling retention rates, while Amelia blamed market conditions rather than acknowledging that firing the person holding everything together had shaken confidence across every major account simultaneously. Shareholders demanded detailed explanations during conference calls, but Amelia repeated phrases about strategic restructuring and long-term vision, while avoiding direct answers about why clients refused to meet new account managers reading from prepared scripts instead of answering questions with knowledge earned through years of experience solving real problems. My attorney said this pattern strengthened our position legally because every canceled meeting and delayed contract showed measurable damage tied directly to leadership decisions rather than external factors. Amelia claimed caused temporary instability inside otherwise healthy operations. I remained silent because speaking too soon would give them arguments about personal grudges rather than documented financial consequences, proving termination without cause triggered contractual clauses. Amelia never considered important until evidence arrived measured in declining revenue instead of angry words delivered too quickly. Waiting felt difficult sometimes because ambition had erased loyalty publicly while patience rebuilt consequences privately. But my attorney reminded me that courts respect precision over emotion, and shareholders respect numbers over promises when money begins disappearing faster than confidence returns. Amelia thought modernization meant replacing relationships with algorithms, but investors watched quarterly projections collapse while lawyers prepared documents turning silence into leverage heavier than speeches about innovation and ambition combined. By the third week, everything Amelia had promised the board began unraveling because clients who once signed multi-year agreements without hesitation now refused simple phone calls from her newly appointed managers who lacked authority earned through years of solving real problems under real pressure. Shareholders demanded updates about declining projections, but Amelia continued blaming market uncertainty, even though internal reports clearly linked falling revenue to client hesitation. Following my termination announced so publicly without preparation or explanation, my attorney gathered copies of those reports because they proved measurable damage directly connected to leadership decisions rather than vague economic conditions. Amelia used as excuses whenever investors questioned disappearing profits during conference calls growing tense as weeks passed without improvement. Former colleagues told me department heads now questioned whether firing me without transition planning had endangered relationships representing nearly half the company's annual revenue, because silence from my side allowed everyone else to draw their own conclusions about whether I might join a competitor eager to capture nervous clients looking for stability. Amelia finally sent another message through her assistant saying she hoped we could resolve matters privately before lawyers became involved. But my attorney advised waiting until shareholder pressure peaked because timing determined whether negotiations favored quiet settlements or public hearings, revealing every mistake leadership tried hiding behind presentations about modernization and efficiency. Each day, emails arrived from clients describing missed deadlines, confused communications, and inexperienced managers unable to answer basic questions about ongoing projects, once handled personally by someone who knew every detail because relationships lasted longer than job titles inside companies pretending loyalty and trust could be automated like production lines, assembling identical parts without human judgment. Some clients warned Amelia they would reconsider contracts if leadership failed to restore stability before next quarter, because investors financing their projects demanded reliability above all else, and reliability vanished the moment ambition replaced experience without planning or respect for consequences measured in real money, leaving corporate accounts too quickly to ignore. My attorney said we would deliver formal notice the following week outlining contract violations, including termination without documented cause, damages tied to reputation harm, accelerated compensation clauses, and client retention metrics falling below thresholds, triggering automatic penalties. Amelia signed years earlier without reading carefully because she believed loyalty lasted only while convenient for people holding power temporarily. Waiting felt deliberate because silence combined with growing pressure created conditions favoring settlement on our terms, rather than arguments about interpretation raised too early before evidence reached critical mass impossible to dismiss once. Shareholder anger joined client hesitation, forming pressure heavier than Amelia's confidence projected during public appearances, claiming everything remained stable despite numbers proving otherwise. Former colleagues described meetings where board members questioned whether leadership changes endangered future growth because clients represented revenue, revenue supported investors, and investors controlled decisions once losses threatened. Returns promised by ambitious executives, forgetting companies survive only while customers remain confident enough to stay. My attorney reminded me ambition fades quickly when confronted with contracts written precisely to protect people who understood promises carry weight heavier than speeches once money begins disappearing because silence, evidence, and timing together create consequences arriving too late for negotiations, favoring those responsible for mistakes revealed only after reality removes their excuses completely. The formal notice went out the following Monday morning because my attorney said waiting longer would weaken nothing but strengthen the pressure already building from shareholders, clients, and employees watching leadership lose control quietly while pretending everything remained under their command. The document cited every clause Amelia violated by terminating me publicly without documented cause, including reputation harm provisions, client retention guarantees, accelerated compensation triggers, and defamation protections written years earlier. When her father insisted loyalty deserved legal safeguards against impulsive decisions made by future executives, believing experience could be replaced overnight. My attorney delivered copies to the board, senior partners, and corporate counsel because visibility ensures accountability. Once evidence reaches enough eyes to prevent private dismissals or quiet disappearances favored by leadership afraid of lawsuits damaging reputations already collapsing under shareholder scrutiny. We attached client statements linking hesitation directly to my removal, internal emails admitting declining confidence among investors, and financial projections showing revenue losses growing steadily since Amelia replaced relationships with software systems and interns reading scripted responses to questions requiring judgment developed only through years of direct involvement. Silence remained my only public response because words invite arguments while documents create obligations impossible to ignore. When numbers, signatures, and timelines align too perfectly for excuses about misunderstanding or miscommunication to survive legal review conducted by professionals uninterested in ambition or emotion. Amelia sent messages insisting everything could be resolved privately without escalating toward litigation. But my attorney advised waiting because shareholder anger increased daily while clients canceled meetings, delayed renewals, and requested assurances leadership could not provide without admitting firing me without transition. Planning caused damage measurable in dollars disappearing from accounts funding quarterly reports investors expected to grow, not shrink. Former colleagues described emergency meetings where Amelia defended modernization strategies even as department heads presented data showing performance declines across every division connected to clients refusing cooperation after my departure. Announced so abruptly during that boardroom confrontation, she believed demonstrated confidence but actually triggered clauses guaranteeing compensation. Once loyalty turned against leadership, ignoring consequences outlined clearly in contracts written long before ambition replaced caution. Shareholders began demanding independent reviews of management decisions because investors care less about innovation speeches than balance sheets, showing whether confidence supports future growth or vanishes alongside customers refusing commitments. Under executives projecting control while losing revenue, everyone expected them to protect. My attorney said we would let shareholder pressure escalate before offering settlement terms requiring full compensation, public retractions, and contractual penalties enforced unless the board resolved matters quickly before lawsuits exposed. Everything formally through hearings, investors preferred avoiding whenever private resolutions remained possible, under conditions forcing leadership to surrender before courts demanded transparency, destroying reputations already weakened by financial performance contradicting optimistic forecasts, Amelia repeated, while ignoring numbers disproving every promise made since replacing me with systems, interns, and speeches about modernization solving problems ambition actually created. Silence kept growing heavier because executives, shareholders, and clients waited for Amelia to deliver stability promised repeatedly, but broken publicly once reality replaced confidence with evidence arriving through legal channels indifferent. Toward ambition collapsing under its own weight while contracts turned words into obligations, leadership could no longer delay or dismiss. By the end of that week, shareholder pressure reached levels Amelia could not dismiss because financial reports confirmed declining revenue across multiple divisions directly linked to client hesitation. Following my termination handled so publicly, without planning, explanation, or transition strategy investors expected from leadership promising modernization, without risking existing stability supporting quarterly returns demanded by everyone funding future expansion plans. Independent auditors requested access to internal communications after several board members insisted decisions affecting revenue required documentation, proving risk assessments existed before removing the executive managing relationships, representing nearly half the company's annual income for over a decade without complaints, warnings, or performance issues previously recorded anywhere in corporate files. My attorney provided copies of termination notices, contract clauses, and shareholder inquiries, because transparency favors the side presenting evidence before opponents scramble, creating narratives collapsing under documents carrying signatures, dates, and financial consequences. Ambition always underestimates until lawyers deliver reality heavier than press releases. Promising innovation, investors stop believing when numbers move opposite directions from speeches delivered confidently while revenue disappears quietly. Amelia scheduled emergency meetings claiming external factors caused temporary declines, despite internal emails admitting clients refused cooperation after leadership changes removed people they trusted personally for years, while replacing them with software dashboards, scripted responses, and managers lacking authority to solve problems requiring judgment developed through relationships built carefully over decades rather than automation installed over weekends. Former colleagues described growing frustration among department heads facing canceled contracts, delayed projects, and nervous investors demanding stability leadership could not provide while pretending everything remained under control despite evidence arriving daily through financial reports disproving every promise repeated during conference calls. Amelia used to reassure shareholders, losing patience faster than revenue recovered under executives offering explanations sounding weaker each. Weak performance metrics declined further. My attorney advised waiting while pressure increased because settlements favor the side demonstrating preparation, documentation, and patience when opponents lose investor confidence before negotiations begin under conditions leaving them little leverage beyond avoiding lawsuits, guaranteeing publicity shareholders always prefer avoiding when financial losses already threaten leadership stability. Boards protect only while returns justify defending executives against criticism growing louder. Each quarter profits decline instead of growing. We documented every shareholder complaint demanding explanations about firing decisions, every client statement linking hesitation directly to leadership changes, every internal email describing uncertainty among managers instructed to defend, modernization strategies contradicting reality measured through canceled contracts, delayed renewals, and declining projections impossible to hide. Once auditors demanded transparency, investors considered mandatory before approving future budgets. Under executives promising efficiency while delivering losses, ambition never predicted when replacing loyalty, experience, and relationships with systems, interns, and speeches, collapsing under financial results contradicting every forecast. Previously celebrated during meetings now focused entirely on lawsuits, settlements, and leadership credibility disappearing alongside investor patience, shrinking faster than quarterly earnings Amelia once promised modernization would protect. Silence from my side ensured blame stayed entirely on leadership decisions because arguments invite distractions while documents, audits, and financial consequences keep attention fixed on evidence proving ambition replaced judgment recklessly until investors demanded accountability contracts, clauses, and signatures forced upon leadership under pressure, heavier than innovation speeches delivered confidently while revenue kept falling faster each month. Stability remained absent despite promises, repeated endlessly without results, convincing anyone demanding numbers instead of excuses collapsing under reality, arriving too late for control, returning before consequences finished. Everything ambition started proudly but ended badly once evidence replaced words completely. The lawsuit filing went out the following Monday morning because shareholder pressure, client hesitation, and declining revenue created conditions My attorney said guaranteed leverage once everything reached courtrooms investors always prefer, avoiding whenever private settlements remain possible under terms favoring the side holding contracts, clauses, and evidence nobody can dismiss without risking publicity destroying leadership credibility completely. We cited termination without documented cause, triggering accelerated compensation clauses, public reputation harm provisions, client retention guarantees, and defamation protections violated when Amelia announced my removal publicly before shareholders, employees, and clients without explanation. Transition planning or performance issues recorded anywhere inside corporate files. Auditors already requested while investigating declining revenue investors, demanded leadership stabilize. Before approving budgets delayed repeatedly since modernization promises collapsed under financial losses, ambition never predicted accurately. The filing included client statements linking hesitation directly to my termination, shareholder complaints demanding accountability, and internal emails admitting department heads warned leadership about risks ignored completely before firing. Someone managing relationships representing nearly half the company's annual revenue during years investors considered stable, until leadership decisions triggered losses spreading across divisions depending entirely on clients refusing cooperation. Once trust disappeared faster than software systems replaced experience, Amelia dismissed carelessly. My attorney attached financial reports showing revenue declines accelerating each quarter. Since my removal contrasted against growth recorded consistently under previous leadership, because comparisons matter legally when proving damages measured. Objectively through numbers, executives cannot dispute after investors verify accuracy through independent auditors demanding transparency. Amelia avoided until lawsuits forced disclosures replacing speeches promising innovation nobody believed after. Forecasts collapsed repeatedly despite presentations claiming modernization protected growth, disappearing steadily while shareholder confidence followed revenue downward together. Former colleagues said board members demanded emergency meetings with corporate counsel after lawsuits reached public records because investors needed assurances. Leadership understood contractual obligations violated by decisions causing financial harm measured through canceled contracts, delayed renewals, and declining stock valuations. Dropping faster than executives offered explanations, collapsing under evidence lawyers delivered formally through filings carrying signatures, dates, and documentation contradicting every statement claiming external factors caused problems clearly linked internally to termination decisions Amelia defended publicly while investors lost patience privately. My attorney advised waiting again after filing because lawsuits carry weight growing heavier each week. Defendants lose investor confidence faster than revenue stabilizes under leadership facing board pressure, demanding resolutions before publicity. Damages valuations further through headlines. Investors hate reading about companies promising modernization, delivering lawsuits, losses, and leadership uncertainty, replacing growth forecasts once celebrated during quarterly calls collapsing under evidence proving ambition ignored contractual obligations triggering consequences designed specifically to protect loyalty, relationships, and experience. Executives believed unnecessary until reality arrived. Carrying lawyers investors listened to. Carefully after profits disappeared following speeches predicting stability. Ambition never delivered before lawsuits forced accountability. Ambition avoided until contracts enforced obligations. Nobody escapes once courts demand compliance beyond. Negotiations favoring defendants only while confidence survives longer than revenue investors require protecting returns. Collapsing now under leadership decisions, defendants cannot defend successfully after evidence proves mistakes repeatedly before. Judges ignoring speeches while enforcing contracts violated recklessly. Despite warnings, ambition dismissed until consequences arrived heavier than promises. Leadership kept breaking publicly before lawsuits ended, arguments replacing modernization with liability. Executives never expected until investors demanded accountability stronger than loyalty. Ambition erased too quickly. The shareholder gala became the turning point because investors arrived expecting stability. While rumors about lawsuits, revenue declines, and leadership failures spread through conversations Amelia could not control despite speeches promising modernization would restore growth. Disappearing faster each quarter after my termination triggered clauses nobody considered until consequences arrived. Carrying documents heavier than words repeated endlessly without results convincing anyone. Demanding numbers instead of excuses collapsing under reality measured by losses impossible to hide. Once auditors confirmed accuracy across financial reports proving ambition, ignored obligations, contracts enforced automatically when violated publicly, before shareholders demanding accountability stronger than loyalty erased carelessly. I attended quietly because my attorney said presence mattered when investors compared leadership confidence against evidence arriving through lawsuits Amelia claimed unnecessary, despite clauses guaranteeing compensation, damages, and penalties. Enforced automatically unless settlements resolved matters. Before courts demanded compliance, boards preferred avoiding. Once valuations dropped faster than forecasts recovered under executives refusing responsibility until pressure forced negotiations. Beginning privately after lawsuits removed control from leadership unable to explain revenue declines. Accelerating while investors demanded answers about clients refusing renewals, canceled after relationships disappeared alongside stability. Amelia promised modernization would strengthen before ambition replaced experience. Destroying confidence investors considered essential before approving budgets. Delayed repeatedly since forecasts collapsed under mistakes. Leadership refused admitting until lawsuits proved obligations ignored recklessly. Despite warnings arriving long before consequences removed arguments. Ambition repeated publicly without solutions. Satisfying shareholders losing patience faster than profits vanished under leadership. Decisions nobody defended. Once evidence reached headlines. Investors read carefully before demanding resignations. Amelia resisted while settlements finalized privately, protecting valuations from publicity. Destroying reputations, already collapsing. Internally, negotiations ended after 3 weeks because board members insisted lawsuits disappear before quarterly reports revealed losses. Exceeding projections already lowered repeatedly since my removal triggered declines. Investors connected directly to leadership changes. Amelia defended publicly until settlements required compensation clauses fulfilled completely. Public retractions issued formally, and damages paid quietly before courts enforced judgments removing negotiation control leadership. Wanted retaining, despite valuations demanding closure, investors prioritized above ambition, collapsing under financial obligations. Nobody escapes once contracts replace promises broken publicly, while evidence replaces speeches ignored privately until settlements silence arguments. Ambition loses permanently when investors protect returns before reputations executives fail. Defending once reality proves confidence disappears faster than loyalty returns. After lawsuits rewrite endings, ambition never predicts accurately until consequences arrive, carrying signatures, payments, and resignations. Boards demand before stability rebuilds under leadership, replacing mistakes. Ambition created recklessly while ignoring contracts, protecting loyalty erased. Before obligations enforced formally removed arguments. Ambition repeated until investors ended everything permanently. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city are you watching, 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 watching.